Hi and welcome to this beginner's course. By the end of this Flutter course, you'll know what is cross-platform development, what is Flutter, how do you get started with it, building your first app in Flutter, and then we'll move on to dive into some advanced Flutter topics as we build better projects. I am Aditya Thakur. I am a developer and designer and have previous experience working with Flutter as an intern and then as a developer at a Bangalore-based company. I also contribute to open source projects like the Flutter Community Plus plugins. I have been a speaker at the Flutter Vikings, which is the largest Nordic Flutter conference, the global summit, and events across India. So, what is Flutter? Flutter is an open source framework by Google for building beautiful natively compiled applications that are also multi-platform from a single code base. Which means using the same code base, you can build for multiple devices. In the mobile segment, you can build for the Android and the iOS. You can build web applications with Flutter, and you can also build desktop applications, for example, for Windows, for Mac OS, and for Linux. Right now in stable version, Flutter lets you build for Android, iOS, web, and the desktop, which is the Windows platform. If you'll go over to flutter.dev, which is the official Flutter website, you will see all the features mentioned here. Flutter is fast because it natively compiles. It is productive because it lets you quickly see the changes that you make in code, and it is also flexible, that is, you can customize every pixel on screen. With its multi-platform availability, you can deploy your code using the single code base to different platforms such as the mobile, web, desktop, and embedded devices. You can also transform your workflow with the developer tooling made available. Flutter is right now used in production by a number of big companies. The Google Pay app uses Flutter. There are other big companies using Flutter. For example, the BMW app is made in Flutter. The Philips Hue app is made in Flutter, and a lot of these companies use Flutter. Flutter is open source, which is you can view the code by going over to their GitHub repository, even create an issue and also contribute to it. It is supported by Google and is open to everyone. Now, Flutter is a framework and it is powered by Dart, a language optimized for fast apps on any platform. The language that we would be writing code is Dart. And in the next module, we'll look at what is Dart and how can you write code with it. We'll try to clear some of our basic Dart concepts before we move on to building our applications in Flutter. In this module, we'll look at the Dart programming language. Dart is an optimized language to build faster applications, and you can learn about it by going over to dart.dev and documentation. Here you'll have everything from language samples to language tour, effective Dart writing guide. So if we go down to language tour, this would be a tour of the Dart language, which provide you all the contents right here. Everything that you would have to do would generally be here, and you can refer this documentation. What I want to quickly show you are some basic concepts in Dart. So we can try out Dart in our browser by going over to try Dart from this menu. And here we have a simple program. So when writing code in Dart, the first function to get control is the main function, as is the case with any programming language. So we create a new main function, something like this, void main, and it can have some optional parameters, optional arguments here, but we wouldn't pass them just right now. And we can use the print statement to print hello world to our console. Right. I'll have to close this off with a semicolon at the end, and we have a simple Dart program. If I hit run, it should print out hello world to our console right here, and there you have it. Now, what if I wanted to somewhat print my name? So I can create a new variable, call this var name equals to Aditya. Close this off with semicolon, and now instead of saying hello world, I can use string interpolation, which can be done using a $sign and typing in the variable name, and with that I'll have hello Aditya printed out to console. So this was a basic program. If I'll again go down to the docs, I can check out all the built-in data types in the Dart programming language. We'll go down to a Dart tour of a Dart language. You have already seen the basic Dart program, which is a hello world program. If I go down to keywords, you'll have a list of all the keywords available in Dart, but what I want to check out is the variables. So we can use var keyword to create a new variable name. Similarly, we can explicitly declare the type of this variable. For example, instead of having a var here, I can use the string data type to create, to explicitly mention the data type of this variable. Dart is a strongly typed language. So when I use the var keyword to declare a variable name, it automatically infers the data type of that variable to be of type string. But I can also explicitly declare them, as in I can tell the compiler that it is of type string. So both of these should work just fine. Now we can also have a default value. In our case, we are already creating a default value, which we can change later on to be something like name equals to, let us say, Aman. I'll close this off. If I run this program right now, it should be by default Aditya, and then it should change this name value to Aman, and it should print out the new name, which is hello Aman, to the console, which is a simple programming concept. Like, you can change these values. In our case, we have been initializing a default value, as in we are saying that the name, when initialized, it has a default value of Aditya. But if there are like uninitialized variables that have a nullable type, for example, if we create a variable to be nullable, for example, if in our case we make this explicit, like we make this variable nullable, and if I try to print it out right now, it should print out hello null to the console. If I remove this, try to do something like this, you'll see like the non-nullable local variable name must be assigned before it can be used. Now we need to assign a value for it if we want to use it later on. So we can call this late string name, say name equals to Aditya, something like this. Now if I run this program, it should print out hello Aditya to the console. This late variables was introduced in Dart 2.12, which is used to declare a non-nullable variable that is initialized after its declaration. So we are declaring the variable here, but we are initializing it here, and then we can print out the value in the third statement. There are also final and const keyword. Now if I make a particular variable final, it would mean that its value cannot be changed. For example, here if I made final name equals to Bob, if I try to change it later on, it cannot be done. We cannot change the value of a final variable. And with constant, we want to say that the variable is compile time constant, which is a way of telling the compiler that the value wouldn't change. As in, we can use it for some constant values. For example, if we have a variable that stores the pi value, we could have it constant everywhere. Constant variables are all implicitly final. Now let us also quickly look at all the built-in types available in Dart. We have integers, which is used to store numbers. We have double, which is used to store decimal numbers. We have string. Boolean is used for true and false. Then there are other types like list, sets, map, runes, symbols, and the value null. So we kind of saw like what the value null was when we were printing out the name. We'll look at most of these data types as we go ahead with the tutorial. Like, we would want to use lists and maps later on. Right now the basic data types should be clear. So if instead of having like a string of name, I have like a number, like let us say int marks equal to 20, I can use it something like this. I'll get rid of this name here, and I can print out the marks to console, something like this, and specify this marks variable right here. So I can run this program really quick, and I should have like a printed value, marks are 20. If I wanted to use a decimal type value, I could specify it as a double instead of using int here, and if I run this program, it should run fine. Similarly, there is also the bool keyword to declare boolean. So let us say bool is true equal to boolean, let us say pass equal to, let's set this to false initially, and I can print out this if pass or not to the console. So I'll print this out really quick, and it should just tell us if the person is pass or fail, and it says false right now. In this video, we want to learn functions better. So I'll get rid of this default code of the hello world statement. Right now I'm using the dart.dev, try dart, which is an online dart IDE where you can try out dart, and this is to explain you some of these dart concepts. So I can create a new function. To create a new function, what I can do is I can type in the name of the function, for example get info, which would be a new function, and then I'll have to open these round brackets and curly brackets. So inside the round brackets go our arguments if there are any, and inside the curly brackets we write the logic for a function. A function is simply put is a group of statements. If we want to repeat certain statements, instead of having them instead of writing them again and again, we can create a function and call this function more than once. So let me say there is a function get info which takes in as arguments a name and a integer roll number. So I can create these values and I can go ahead inside my function and print out these values to console as we have previously seen by just typing in the name of the variable we want to print. And I can do the same for the roll number. Close this as well. All right, we're good to go. Now, how do we call these functions? So main function is our first function to get control, and I can call this function inside by typing in get info, and I can do it something like this. So you'll notice that we are getting an error which says that 2 positional arguments are missing. So I can pass these values by typing in Aditya and a number, let us say 243 is my roll number. If I run this function right now, it should print out the 2 values to console. For example, we got name and 243 in the next line. So this is like a simple function implementation, but I wanted to show you how to pass these values to the function and also how to call the function inside our main. Now, when working with Flutter, this is like a basic concept we would use. We would want to create our own functions to optimize the process. One more thing that I quickly want to show you is how to create named parameters. So we can wrap the 2 parameters we have right here inside the curly braces. Now, instead of passing them like this, we'll have to specify name and use a colon, specify the value in front of it. And similarly for roll number, I'll have to type in roll number colon and the corresponding value in front of it. Alright, so inside our function 2, we'll have to make it required if it is like required. Unless it is not required, we'll have to specify a default value. For example, let us say the default value is. Now if we run this program, it should work fine. There you have it. Like we have printed out Aditya and 24. Now I introduced 2 new things here. One is the required keyword, which basically suggests that when calling this function get info, we definitely need to pass in the roll number. Now if I do not pass this name, the function would still work without any error. It would pick this default value and it would try to print it out to console. So we get ADI and 24 under it. But if we remove this particular value which is required, we would get an error which would say like, okay, one issue, which is the name parameter roll number is required and it is missing. Now, instead of using something like required, I can also specify a default value for this roll number. Let me say 2. And then if I, instead of specifying a default value here, I can make name required instead. So now I'll have to pass in name whenever calling this. and I can pass in by name and save it like this, run the function, and it should work just fine. So we have seen like the basics of how we can create a function. We can also specify a return type. For example, in our case, it would be void since the function is not returning anything, but we can also type in string and come back here, return some random string, let us say done. So I can wrap this get info function inside a print statement to get this return value and also print it out to console, which would work. So I can get rid of this extra semicolon. Now if I run this program, it should print out Adi, the number 2, and then finally return this done, and then that done would be printed out from our main function. So these are like the basics of working with functions. We saw how we can create a function. We saw how we can specify normal parameters. Then we went on to see how we can make them named parameters. Also how we can pass in a default value or maybe make it required. And then lastly, we saw the return types of the function. And that is about it. Now, if you want to learn more about functions and how, like what all options are there, you can again go down to the docs, go to language tour, and here we have functions. So it will tell you everything, how a function is created, about the parameters, like how you can, when defining parameters, how you can specify named parameters, and the main function. So this is the main function, which is the first one to get control, and a lot of other options right here. So we also saw return values. Now one quick point, like if here instead of specifying like a default value, you wanted to have a function which would be named, for example, let us say it had to be named, but you didn't want to specify like a default value, so you can make it nullable as in string name. Now the error should go away. So when calling this function, it is up to you if you want to pass in the value or not. And that is about it. So in this video, we look at conditionals in Dart. So specifying a conditional is very simple. If I get rid of this default print statement that I have, I can use the if keyword and specify some condition. Like let us say if num is greater than 5, and I'll also have to close this bracket really quick and then specify curly brackets where our statement would go. Now I'll just quickly format this here so that it's better visible, and I can print out like if num is 5. So let me create a number variable, which is in our case, let us make it equal to 10 to just get started with. Now if I run this program, obviously this number is greater than 5, therefore this print statement should execute and it would print out hello world. We can also specify an else condition. Let us say there is an else normally doesn't take in like a condition in front of it. So it would just be like if this case is not executed, the control would go to this particular case. So let me copy this print statement from here, paste it here, and let us type something else like else. For example, there is a condition where our number is 4. Now if I run this program, it should, since it is num is not greater than 5, it would go to this else case and it should print out else to our console. So it's right here. And what if, like if you have multiple case, so you can use the else if keyword, which would take in a condition. So I'll have to specify a else if condition. Also there would be some space right here, and then I can just create curly braces where our statement would go for this particular case. Now inside my else if, let me say like number is greater than 3. So I can print out something like hello only for now. I also have to put in a curly brace right here. So if I run this program right now, it should, since number is greater than 3, first it would check for this, it's not greater than 5, but it is greater than 3. Therefore, this particular block of code will be executed, which would print out hello to console. So this is like a simple else if statement. Instead of using else if, we also have switch case in Dart. How is that? used. So we have the switch keyword we want to specify. So I can type in switch and the variable that it would be, tracking. So in our case, let us say num, and for I can open these curly braces which would have all the cases inside. So let me say there is a case where this num could be 1. In that particular case, what do I want to do? So I'll have to specify case 1 and then use the colon, and then we can type in the parent statement, which we can call it hello. Close this. And as with switch case, after every case we need to specify break. Now when the control goes to this case 1 and for some reason if number is equal to 1, this statement would be executed. But once that is done, we need to specify break, unless we need to specify and tell that this particular case is over here. So this break keyword is used to break the flow of control. And there could be a case where this number is 2. I can print out certain value. In that case, we can print out like world here and specify a semicolon right here. So I'll have to specify break once everything that I want to do for a particular case is done. And then we also have a default case, which basically tells the compiler what to do if none of these cases are satisfied. So in our default case, we can type in something like done for now, like we didn't have anything else to do, so we'll print out done. So if I run this case right now, you'll see that num value is 4. So it will check both of these cases, but since it doesn't find anything, it would switch to this default and just print out done. Now let us say the value of this particular case is 1. So if I run this program right now, what it should do is it would check here and the value is 1. This particular case should be executed and hello is printed out to console. Now as I was talking, right, the break keyword is important to break the flow of control. It will check, it will execute these statements and then break this flow. But if this break keyword is not here, what would happen is the control would go to the next statement and it would also execute this statement. So the error would be shown, as in it tells you like the case should not complete normally. Try adding break, and if you try running this, you'll get basically tells you that the case may fall through, which is a condition that happens if there is a missing break in a case. The control falls to the next case and this particular statement is also executed. So this is how you can use switch case in Dart. With that done, in the next video, let us have a look at all the loops. Now let us say you want to print out this statement, Flutter is love, multiple times. You can repeat these statements, as in you can try to write this statement again and again and then run this program. It should work fine. Like you'll get this statement printed out to console. But when you're working on big applications, this might not be the best approach. You can instead, to repeat certain statements again and again, you can use a loop. How does that work? We have the for keyword to create a loop. You can type in for, and then inside the curly brackets, you can specify some condition. For example, we can create a variable I equals to 0. This would be the initial value of I. Then we can continue to increment this value of I and also specify a condition like I is less than 5, I plus plus, and then the semicolon would not come here, and we can print out the statements that we were previously using. So if I run this program again, it should work similarly. Like it should print out 5 statements to console, which is Flutter is love, and we had to write like minimum code. How does this work? We created a new variable I. We set a condition like, okay, this value, as long as it is less than 5, so it starts at 0, it goes up to 5, less than 5, that is 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So it starts at 0, goes till 4, which is less than 5, and then it would print out this statement. We also have to specify an increment condition, which in our case would be 1. For example, the value would increase by 1 every time it starts at 0, I equals to 0, this statement is printed, then I would become I plus plus, which is I would become 1. It would control would go again up here and it would print out this statement again. So that way you'll have 5 statements printed out starting from 0 going up to 4, which is less than 5. I hope this makes sense. Now in a case like where we do not know, like the for loop was very simple. It incremented as long as the value was less than a variable. But let us say we do not know this and instead we have a condition. As long as that is satisfied, we can print the value out. In that case, we use something called the while keyword, and it is similar to for loop. Instead, it takes in a condition right here and you have to specify this condition. As long as this condition is again true, the statements would be printed out to console, otherwise it would not be done. Let us say there is a keyword int n equals to 0. While this n is less than 5, we need to execute this program, which would be print Flutter is awesome, dollar the value of n, close this loop here, n plus plus. Now if I run this program, it should print out this value. So with this program, like you can print out Flutter is awesome, and you can actually see like for when the value of n was 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, and then 4. Once it became 5, this condition was not satisfied and the control didn't go to this loop. Let us also understand the break keyword. So if let us say this n value, let me come up here, if n value equal to 3, this is our condition which checks for equality. What I want to do is I want to break out of this loop. So I'll type in break. Let us run this program really quick. You'll see like after this value becomes 3, that is after 2, when this value becomes 3, this loop is exited. This statement is not printed, and neither would the value of n increase after that, and the control would exit this while loop. If there are any statements beyond it, those will be executed, but since we do not have any, that is all break keyword does. But let us say instead of break we were using continue. Now continue, what it does is, unlike break that completely exits the loop, continue would only skip the rest of these statements. So continue would skip the rest of these statements, which means this n plus plus would also be skipped, and it might turn into like a complete it might turn into like a no stop loop or a loop that is forever executing. We'll get an error then, so I'll just shift this n plus plus above. So let us try running this again. Now you'll see that Flutter is awesome. What happens is when the control enters this, it increases by 1, so the first value that is printed out is 1. So on there is 5, but the 1 for 3 is skipped. So 1, 2, 4 and 5, the value for 3, if n equals to 3, is skipped, and you do not get an output in that case. So this is like the basics of break and continue keyword. We looked at the for and the while loop. The last loop to look at is the do while loop. So what happens is with the do while loop, in our while loop, statements were only executed if this condition was satisfied. But we also have a do while loop which basically would run once every time. So you'll have to specify like a do right here, and it would be followed by the condition that we are checking. So we specified do, and we'll have to type in while, and inside the bracket specify our condition, which in our case would be something like n is less than 5, and we can type in like print some statement like hello world, hello, and we'll also type in, let us say, type in the value of n right here so that it's clearer, and then we'll also have to specify an increment value so that our loop doesn't get stuck at one place. Let us try running this once. What should happen is that it would do it for it would print out a 0, then it would increase the value of n, and as long as this n is less than 5, this code would run. But let us say that in some case this value is 6, which is definitely not less than 5. Would this loop work? So if we try running this once, we notice that the loop does work once. Even though the condition is n is less than 5, still the loop prints this out, goes over here, the n value would become 7, which is definitely not less than 5. That is why this loop would only work once, which is the difference between do and while loop. So if you want to execute the statement once, even though the condition is not satisfied, you can use the do while loop. Otherwise, you can use the while loop to check for a condition. And the for loop, when you have like an initial value and then you want to go up to certain value, like n is until that condition is satisfied, you can use the for loop. So with that done, like we have mostly covered all the basics of like the Dart programming language. If we'll go again down to the language tour, you'll notice like after functions we did these conditional control flow statements, and we also have looked at some operators like the basic arithmetic operators. There's plus, minus, equality check operators, which we would be talking about as we work with Flutter. There would be relational operators that we would be looking at, and after this there are the classes, so which we would be talking in length when we're working with Flutter, because we would need to work with these classes. And you can check out more if you want to know from this language tool itself. Now it is time to set up Flutter on your local device. Head over to flutter.dev and click on Get Started. This will take you to the install page. Depending on the operating system you are on, it will show you the different options to select from. Since I am on a Windows, I will select Windows Install, and it will show me all the steps to install Flutter on Windows. There are system requirements that you would need. Your operating system should be Windows 7 or later. And once you satisfy these requirements, you can click on Get the Flutter SDK. This should download a zip folder to your local storage. The next step to do is to extract this zip file and place it in a contained Flutter folder in the desired installation location. On my local system, I have Flutter in my local disk C in a folder called src, where I've extracted the Flutter files. Next step to do is to edit environment variables and add the Flutter path to your environment variables. Once you do that, you should have the Flutter command accessible through the console. So you can run Flutter Doctor to check if the installation is successful. You'll also need to set up an IDE. You can choose to have Android Studio as your IDE, or you can also use VS Code. I would recommend watching a dedicated tutorial on the installation process depending on the current configuration of operating system you are on. Once done, if you'll go over to your command prompt of terminal, you would be able to run the Flutter version command, something like this. It should show you the current Flutter version you are on, the version of the Dart SDK, and you can run the Flutter Doctor command to check if everything is working fine. And since no issues are found, I have successfully installed Flutter on my Windows. In the next video, we'll look at getting started with Flutter and running our first Flutter project. So once Flutter is installed correctly, we can go ahead and create a new Flutter project by going over to our command prompt or the terminal and typing in Flutter create and then we'll have to type in the name of the project that we want to create. For example, we can go ahead with new app for now. So if I'll hit enter, this should create the Flutter project for me. It's running Flutter pub-get, which is basically trying to get the packages, and it would say all done, which means the project was successfully created. And I can just open the project that I had just created by typing in code and new app. So this should open this newly created project in Visual Studio Code. Now, this is like the basic layout of a Flutter project. You have the Android directory, which stores the native Android code. We have a web directory, which would have the web files, the iOS directory for the iOS, and a Windows directory. What else you'll notice here are some other files, such as one very important file is the pubspec.yaml. This is where the configuration for our project goes. Let us say if you want to add any packages or plugins later on, this is where you will put them in. All the packages go under dependencies. If you want to add like images, you can have assets in your file, assets. You can have assets in your file, you can have fonts. And in this particular tutorial, we'll also see how to add these and also how to change the font of your application. But for now, let us go over to this folder called lib. Inside this folder, you'll see a main.dart file. This is the file we would be working with, or this is the folder we would majorly be working on. The lib folder would contain all our Dart code, which is required to create Flutter applications. When you open this main.dart, you again see the main function, which we have talked about previously. This is the first function to get control, and this is where our application starts. Now the Flutter team by default has written some code for us, which we can run by going down to run and debug and launching this application. Since I'm working on Windows, this application or the project should launch as a Windows application, but we can also connect our mobile emulators and run it as a mobile app, or maybe run it on Chrome as a web app. For now, let us build this application really quick. If you're working on Android Studio, the project creation process is similar. What you'll have to do is click on new Flutter project and select the different options that you wanted to have, like the Android, iOS, or the web option, and create the project accordingly. So we have the app running right now. This is the default application that all new Flutter projects come with. What it has is a floating action button here, which lets you increment this counter on screen, and it shows you how many times you have pushed the button. What you'll also notice is a small app bar on top, which says Flutter demo homepage. Now this would be same for when you're working on a mobile. It would look a little more compressed, something like this. If you're working on web, it would again be like a web browser setting. But this is the default project that all Flutter apps come as. So starting right now, we would clear out some code from this homepage, and we'll try to see like how some of these elements are modified to create apps of your own. So far we have seen like what the default application is. Now to quickly see some of these changes as we write code in, I will position my code editor something like this. I'll also have the running instance of my application on the side. Yep. I'll expand this a bit and position it right here. Now we'll try to create like a simple hello world application of our own that we also understand. What I'll do is I'll come down here where class my homepage is written and close this, get rid of some of this default code which I don't really need right now. So I will remove this from here and also get rid of these comments that are here on the screen right now. So this would make the whole code a bit shorter, and you'll see like we have a main function which is the first function to get control, and we also have we have something called a MyApp widget, which is basically being run right here. I'll tell you all about what widgets are, but what I'll do quickly is I'll get rid of this my homepage right here, and now to build our hello world application, I can type in text and pass in a string which would be hello world. If I save this right now, you'll see like a hello world appear right here, but it's not uh, it's not very good UI wise. But this is like a very simple code to create your first hello world application in Flutter. What we have done so far is we have a main function which runs this MyApp. MyApp right here is a stateless widget, and I'll tell you all about widgets in this. But what it does is basically it returns a material app with something called title, Flutter demo, a theme, and a home set to something called text. Text again here is a widget which takes in a string to display on screen right here. To make it more UI friendly, I can quickly tap on this bulb like icon and I can say wrap with the widget, call this widget a scaffold. And instead of having a child, a scaffold would have a body. If I save this really quick, you'll see hello world appear better on screen. So what are these widgets? What is this scaffold? What is this text? Let's see. Now widgets are building blocks of Flutter. If you go down to the docs, you'll see something called a Widgets Catalog, which would tell you how you can dive into this deep set of Flutter widgets available in the SDK. You can think of these widgets as like Lego blocks. So let us say you want to add some text. There are text widgets available that you can use. Now let us say you can think of these widgets as Lego blocks, which you can put one on top of the other to build your whole application. Inside this widget catalog, you'll see all the different widgets available. Let us say you want to add some text. So you have a text widget, which we just saw. So this displays a list of different text widgets available to you. We use the basic one, which is text, and it lets you add some text to your screen. For example, we had hello world show up on our screen. Defining a text widget is very simple. You type in text, give it the round brackets, and type in the string that you want to show. You can also add certain other properties which we would discuss as we move along with the tutorials. But let us come back to our widgets catalog and try to see what all other widgets are available. Let us say you want to add certain image to screen. You have an image widget available, which you can use to add certain images on top of the screen. For example, let us try using this image widget using the documentation itself. If I come back to my Flutter app, instead of this text widget right here, I can cut out this code and paste this image widget. If I quickly format document, it should make it more clearer. And now I can hot restart my application to sync these files to this. And now you'll see a image appear on screen, which was added using this image widget, which took in a network image, and we passed in the URL for this particular image to show it up on screen. Now, what is this scaffold widget which we were previously using? Scaffold is a very simple widget. It has a lot of properties available in it. For example, let us say you want to add an app bar like we previously had. So you can type in app bar, which is the name of the property that you want to specify, and then pass it an app bar, which is available by default. This is how we pass in a widget. So we type in the widget name and open these round brackets. If I'll save this file really quickly, you'll see a blue app bar appear on top of screen. I can also give it a title. So right now we want to pass in some text as title to this app bar. The property that we want to define is called title, and it takes in a widget, which in our case would be text, because since we want to add some text, I can say hello world again right here. If I save this file, you'll see hello world appear in the app bar, which is what we wanted. So we have an app bar. We also have other properties available, which you can check out by keeping your cursor on top of the widget, going down, and you can see all the different properties you can define. One such property is the floating action button, which can be added as a button right here on top of screen. Let us check that out as well. So if I'll type in floating action button, I can pass in a floating action button as an empty widget. It shows us some error because it says right here that the argument on pressed is required for a floating action button. So we apply the quick fix. So we apply the quick fix, and once we save this file, you'll see a floating action button here, but it does nothing since the on pressed is empty. Now this is like a brief overview of how you could be building applications. The two things that you want to remember from this particular video is we have a lot of widgets available in Flutter to use. There is the documentation that you can refer whenever you are stuck for what widget to use. We'll be talking about some of the basic widgets that normally are required in this tutorial itself. For example, we have so far seen the Scaffold widget, which would let you add an app bar, a floating action button, and also have a central body to modify. We have seen an image widget, which can take in the image property. This could be set to a network image or an assert image that you want to use locally by creating asserts in your project folder. We'll also see how to do that. And we also checked out the text widget, which is like a very basic widget to show some text on top of screen. In the next tutorial, we'll check out more widgets available to us. For example, we'll dive into the buttons. We'll see how to create layout so that you can arrange different elements on screen. So far, we have seen some of the basic widgets, but let us now learn how to create our own widgets. So inside this MyApp, what I'll do is I will get rid of this code right here. I do not need it. I'll have to close off just one bracket. And now if you'll see the code properly, like I'll also get rid of this theme, like we do not need it immediately. So now let us see how can we create our own Flutter widgets. To get started, we'll create a new class. Let's call this home screen. Now we need to extend the stateless widget abstract class, which basically tells the different things that should be there for this home screen class to be a widget. So if I'll hover over this quick fix, I can see like there is one missing override which we need to create, which is basically this build method, which takes in the build context and it returns a widget which would be shown on screen when this home screen is called. So I'll return a text widget for now, which would take in some text. Let us say hello and close this off with a semicolon right here. So we have created a simple home screen widget, which is a stateless widget and returns this text hello onto the screen. Coming back to my MyApp, I can set the home of this material app to this home screen widget we just created. And I'll create these brackets, round brackets, and if I save this file, you'll see hello appear on the screen. So this is a simple way of how you can create your widgets. Now, we'll again go back to the scaffold which we have previously talked about. Why? Because scaffold gives us access to an app bar, a central body, and if you'll check out the documentation itself, it is a visual scaffold for material design widgets. I'll come down here and type in body. And now my body can have something like another text, which again says hello. And if I'll save this file, you see a small text hello appear right here. Now there could be instances when your application needs more than just one widget. So we would need to discuss how you can lay these widgets to build of designs. Now there are three different layout widgets in Flutter that are normally used. One is the column widget. So if you'll type in column, you can create a column widget. But what you'll notice is instead of having just one child as the previous widgets, like material app only had one home property, scaffold only has one body. This column lets you have multiple children. So if I'll go down here, I can create a container, which is another very simple widget in Flutter. It combines some common painting, positioning, and sizing widgets. So container, you can think it of as a simple box widget that you can use. You can give it a certain height, for example 200, and you can give it certain width. For example, let's make it a square, give it a width of 200. We can also change the color property by typing in color and giving it a new color like colors.red. If I'll save this now, you'll see a red box appear here. So this is a simple container that we have just created. Now, since we have wrapped it in a column which takes in multiple children, we could have multiple containers. So let me copy this. We need to have multiple containers on screen. So I can paste it just underneath this other container. And you'll see like a container appear one on top of the other. To make it more visually visible, I'll change the color of the bottom container, and you'll see like two containers are here. One is red, one is yellow, and they are both lying on one top of the other. Similarly, what if you want to arrange these elements horizontally instead of arranging them vertically? You can instead use a row widget, which again, like the column, takes in children and it arranges them horizontally. So you have one adjacent to the other. You can go on and lay out widgets one after the other using the rows and columns. There is also another layout widget that you should be familiar with, which is the stack widget. Stack widget places one widget on top of the other. The bottom red widget is not visible because the yellow widget is totally covering it. But if I decrease the width of this particular widget, you'll see like a red widget appear, which is right now behind this yellow widget. The yellow widget is stacked on top of this red widget. So these are three different layout widgets that you should be familiar with, and we'll see how to build designs using all these three different widgets. So far we have introduced the container widget, the three different layout widgets, which is row, column, and stack. We have previously talked about the scaffold. We have already discussed text and certain properties of the scaffold, such as the app bar, floating action button. With that done, we have almost covered all the basics. The next step in this tutorial is to build our own application that would also make requests from the internet, get data, and show it on screen. We'll be discussing about UIs, how you can create actionable things in Flutter, and progress further into more advanced topics. So far we have done the basics of Flutter. We have learned about the different widgets that are available in it, the layout widgets, some of the basics as in scaffold, text. Now we want to go a bit advanced and we want to look at making API or networking calls in Flutter. How would we do that? Basically is in this module, we'll try to build an application that would get a random code and display it in our app. So here's what we learn while working on this project. First of all, we learn about navigation, how you can move from one screen to other in Flutter. Next, we'll learn about these HTTP calls in Flutter. How can you make one? Get data from the internet. After you get the data, so basically an API call would be something to an external service which would return some data. So you'll make an API call, you'll get some data of the internet and it would come back to your application. Now this data would come as JSON in the JSON format. So we want to also see, like after we get this data, we want to see like how can we parse the JSON in Flutter and use the data that we get to update the UI. We'll also build a beautiful application, which means we'll be working with more UI components and try to make it better. Now, this would all be covered in this module and it will prepare you for working on real world projects where you have to get data off the internet, show it in your app, and it can also go further as to working with backends later on, where you can make a request, send data to backend, and also get it and show it in your application. This is all we will cover in this module. Let me just quickly give you an overview of the API we would be using. So it's a free API, Go Codes API, which basically returns a random code. If I'll hit enter, like you can see what the response looks like. It gives out the status of the response, and it also gives out the message if it's successful API call, and it displays quote. Since we have set this count to 1, we only get one quote, which is here inside the text, and you'll also see the author of it. So we'll try to get it inside our Flutter application and try to show this quote. Now I wouldn't go into the basics of API or how to make this I wouldn't go into like how this API works, but if you will just copy this particular URL and try to run it on your application, you would get a more like a string structure. I can quickly show you by turning off this extension that I have. So if I'll now make this API call, you'll get a response something like this, which should have a code here with the text key and a status. Now we'll talk more about it as we go along with the tutorial, but once this is done, like once you understand how networking calls are made, how you can get data, once you understand navigation, you would be able to build bigger projects where you have to interact with APIs, try to get data off the internet, and possibly work as an intern at a company. And you would also understand the UI elements, how to update them. So let's get started with this particular tutorial. I will create a new Flutter project by going over to my command prompt, and this time I want to make it in my desktop. So I'll first navigate to my desktop and type in Flutter create, which is the command we use to create a new Flutter project, and the name of the project. So let us say Codes app. Now if I'll just hit enter, a Flutter should create this new Flutter project for me, and you'll see it appear right here. This should take some time, and once it's done, you can quickly open it in an editor of your choice. I'll type in Codes app, and it should open this app for me. Now before I go into like how we can run this, now before I go and start editing this project, let me also set up an emulator. For this particular project, I'll use my mobile device as an emulator, so I can just connect that. So I have the emulator running. Now I can quickly run this default project. This should take some time to run. So we have the default application running on our mobile emulator. What I'll first do is I'll get rid of some of the default code that is right here. So I'll remove this code. I'll also come back up here and also remove some of this code that I don't really need. So right now we'll only have a material app. We have our main function that runs our application, and a MyApp widget, which has const my homepage set right now. So with any project, what I like to do is I like to create a new folder, call this screens, and inside this new folder I can create a new file called home screen dot. In bigger projects, you can have all your screen or the UI code in one folder, and what I'll do is I'll create a new stateless widget. And before I do that, with any new file, the first step you can do is import material. What you can do is import material. So this is the material package from Flutter itself. Import Flutter. You can import Flutter material dot. And you can create a new stateless widget. Let us call this home screen for now. Now we've created a new screen, and what I can do is I can copy this name, come back to my main dot, and replace this home page that we have with this new home screen that we just created. We'll again get this error because Flutter doesn't know where this home screen is. So we need to import this library home screen dot to our Flutter project. And once I save this, you'll see the screen go blank because my home screen right now returns a container which is empty. So if I'll save this as well, it will do hot reload, and you'll see the screen has become black. We'll again use the widget that we are familiar with already, which is the Scaffold widget. And just as I do that, I can save this file, and you'll see the screen become white again because the default background color of Scaffold is white. And now I can set the body of this scaffold to be a elevated button. So I need to use a button right now. And why is that? So let us come back to it. But first, let us see what this elevated button is. So I need to right now add a button, which, when you'll click on that button, you'll make an API call. This API call would get some data and then it would show it on screen. So right now, let us create a button on this screen and try to navigate to the next screen. So it will teach you about how navigation is done in Flutter. Before we go to that, we are getting a small error here, and it says like we need to have the required argument on pressed for a button. Now what is this on pressed? This on pressed takes in a function, an unnamed function, which basically is what should happen when the button is pressed. So we are also getting something else. The child is also required. Now the elevated button also needs a child. This child can be some widget, as in text. Let us say this text can say, for now, since we're using it to go to the next screen, let us say that this text is go to next screen. If I'll save this file really quick, you'll see a button appear here, and it is right under my notification bar. So to avoid this from happening, we also have another widget called safe area, which what it does is, let us quickly see the documentation for it. Creates a widget that avoids this operating system interface or the notification bar on top. So right now we have a widget right here. Let us try to bring it to the center by wrapping in a widget known as center. Once I do that, it should come to the center of the screen, which is really cool. So now if I click on this button, you'll see like nothing happens because of course the on pressed is empty, and we want to modify it to maybe go to the next screen. Here would be the flow of this application. When we'll click on this button, it would make an HTTP call, get some data and show it on the next screen. But before we do that, let us create a new screen, right? So let us create a second screen dot really quickly, which again, we need to create a stateless widget. Let us call this second screen. And you'll see like we are getting error under everything like the stateless widget. This is because we haven't imported the material package. And once I do that, I can save this second screen, come back to my home screen. Now navigation in Flutter is done using something called navigator. So we use navigator dot off, which takes in the context, this build context right here, and we can use dot push. Then we'll need to type in the name of the material page root. Which would have this builder property, and we need to pass in the context again, and then return this second screen. Once we do that, so this is like the complete code of navigation in Flutter. Like this is based on navigation 1.0, where the new screen or the new widget that we have is pushed on top of the existing one. So we have this screen right here. The new widget or the second screen that we have would be pushed, sort of like how a stack works. So you will have the bottom line screen, a new screen would be pushed on top of it. So let us see this by running this example. So if I click on go to next screen, you'll see like a blank screen appears, which is again because this second screen has only a empty container. If I'll again make this a scaffold, and if I'll just save this file, you'll see like it becomes white. Also, to visualize it better, let's have an empty app bar on our next screen. So if I'll save this again, you'll see like a blue line appear here, but there is also this back button on top. So if I'll click on this, you'll see like you come back onto your existing screen. And if I'll do this again, you'll notice like the new screen is being pushed, or it's being put up on that previous screen. So this is like a very basic simple navigation example. With Flutter Web, they have also introduced Navigator 2.0, which is something new, which I wouldn't cover completely in this tutorial, but is something you can refer on the side. If we were to come back to our second screen, and let us say if we didn't have this app bar, we'll again have like a elevated button on screen, because it gives us access to this child property, which we can say, for now, let us say this text is go back. So we'll also have to define an on pressed. Let us keep this empty really quickly. And if I'll save this file, let us go to this second screen, and you'll see like the app bar has gone on top of it. I'll again just quickly wrap this with the center to bring this button to the center, and also wrap scaffold with a safe area so that it doesn't come up in this top notification bar. So you're seeing this go back button. Now we want to implement a way to remove this upper screen and go back to our home screen. So how do we do that? We again use navigator and use the dot off, which takes in the context, and we say pop, which is like a very simple way of going back. So we say go back. When we click on it, you'll see like you come back to the home screen that we have. So we'll go to next screen, go back. When we go to the next screen, it pushes in this new screen, and when we go back, it pops it, like is the case in stack. So this is very simple navigation example. So we are done with this. We understand like how you can go from one screen to other. Very simple. What I want to do is I'll get rid of this, body of this second screen. And what I want to do is I want to come back to my home screen, and before we navigate to this new second screen, what we want to do is we want to get the data. Now how would we do that? It should again happen in our on pressed. Let us return to our web browser, and what we want to do is make an HTTP call in Flutter. Have the URL of our API which returns some data, but we want to make an HTTP call in Flutter. So there is a very simple cookbook by the Flutter team itself on how you can fetch and display data with Flutter, and it says add the HTTP package. What are these packages and how to find them? So in Flutter, a lot of the functionality is made available through packages which you can reuse in your Flutter application. All the Flutter packages can be accessed, or all the Dart packages and plugins, you can find them on pub.dev, which is like the official package repository. So we again know what package we want to add, which is the HTTP package, but you can also search for based on your use case, and you can also select the different platforms, the SDKs, and maybe find out what is the Flutter favorite or recommended package. So HTTP is our first choice, which is a package that basically lets you make API calls in Flutter, and they have also included like how can you use it, the different examples, installing, how do you install this, and have like pub points upvoted by different people on this. And you can also view the code for this particular package by going over to their GitHub repository, and if you run into something, you can create a new issue. So HTTP is the package we want to use. Now how to use this? So we'll copy this HTTP package, come down to our pubspec.yaml, which basically should contain all information of the dependencies as I had mentioned. So in this dependencies, I'll paste the HTTP package that I copied under this Cupertino icons. And now before I can use this, I'll have to save this file and run something called Flutter pubget. So Flutter pubget should run automatically, but if it doesn't, you can go over to your terminal and type in this command Flutter pubget, and it should get the packages for you. So once this is done, it's still running. So it was successful, and once this is done, I can come back to my home screen inside the on pressed of this button where I want to make this API call. So here we have the using for this particular package. The first step is importing this package. So I can copy this line of code and import at the top of my file. Now you'll see that we are importing this particular package as HTTP. We can use HTTP to get the different functionality from this package. And Now they have mentioned an example of how you can have a variable URL, which would have the URL you want to make this request to, and you'll get some response. You can wait on that response. Here they are making a post request. Now when you're posting something, you can make a http.post, but in our case we want to get some data of this API, so we'll be making something called a get request. So quickly I'll just copy this particular code and come back to the on press of my button and paste it here. I can format document and just wait for it. Alright, now instead of this particular example, I want to use my API base URL that I have. So I can replace this with this particular URL. And instead of making a http.post, I want to make a http.get, which would not have this body parameter. It would just take in this URL and try to get data from it. And lastly, we'll have these print statement, which would print out the response status and the response body so that we can see what data we are getting. Now, there is also this another keyword, which is the await keyword. What is this? Now, if I'll keep my cursor on top of it, you'll see like the await expression can only be used in an async function. I'll have to make this function async. And what do I mean by that? So in Flutter, when there is a function that would, take time, now this data might take time to be retrieved. So we have to make this function async. That is like it should asynchronously complete while the other processes can get done. But we're using this await keyword here. Why? Because when we make this get request, we need to wait for it. Like while our API is being called, while we get this data and while we wait on this response, like we want to wait for this http.get to occur so that the response variable would get the data in it, and only after that would these statements be executed. If the await keyword was missing here, what would happen is, like before this get request could complete, we will try to print out the response.status code and body, but by that time we would not have a response value completely inside this variable. So this would mean like we'll get a error which right now is saying like isn't defined, because we wouldn't have this future response until then, and we need to wait for this http get.complete before we can print out something of it. So that is what we are trying to do inside this particular function. And if I just hot reload my application, let us see if we are able to print out something. We are doing a hot reload because we just added a new Flutter package. So we want to take these files to this emulator that we have. So this is again a go to screen elevated button that we have. So if I'll click on it, I should get some response in my terminal. So I should get some response in my debug console, and you'll see like after we restarted our application, we got a response status code, which is 200, and a response body as mentioned here, response body, which was this particular message. So we were successfully able to get data of this API and we got it printed out to console. Now the next step is to parse this data. Now we want to be able to use this data inside our Flutter application and not have it something like this. So how can we do that? So once we are successfully able to print data to our terminal, we want to be able to get the data and not just print it out, but instead show it inside our Flutter application. So how can we do that? How can we get the data that we have and try to show it inside our Flutter application? For that, we need to parse this data. Now, if you'll go down to this API response, you'll see like this is just a big string, a big JSON string. We want to be able to parse this JSON string in Flutter. So I can search for parse JSON string in Flutter. And if you'll just quickly look for it, you'll get a few articles on how you can parse. It says like we need to use something called a JSON decode from this Dart convert to serialize this JSON data. How should we do that? So I'll come back to it. I'll have to import this dart convert, which is made available by the dart team, and I can come down to my function and just type in variable data equals to JSON decode, which should take in some string source. In our case, the string is this response dot body that we are getting. I can just paste it here and just do that. Now I want to, let us say, from our string that we are getting, just print out this message. Let us try to print this out. So how can we do that is type in print, the print statement, and this should take in data, and inside these square brackets I want to pass in the key, which in our case would be message. Now if you look at this particular string again, what you'll notice is like this JSON data was a complete string, but once we decode it, we'll get like a JSON, we'll get it as map string dynamic. So in this case, all these keys are string values. So this status is a string value, this message is a string value, and all the values corresponding to them. For example, in this first case, 200 could be a dynamic value, like it could be a number, it could be a list, as is this case, or it could be anything, like it could be string itself. So this is a complete pair of map. This is a map with string values and string keys and dynamic values. So by using this square brackets, we'll type in the name of the key that we want to access. In our case, it would be message. This should print out the value, which is success, to the console. So let us just save this file and just hot restart our application. So we'll get this button again, and we'll also open up our terminal. Let us say new terminal for now, and when we click on this go to next screen button, let us check out our debug console, and you'll see like we got the response status, which we were already getting. We also got the body, which we had previously also got, but we also printed out success to our console. So we were actually able to decode our JSON response, get a map from it, and just parse that, as in get the message and type in the key value and get the corresponding value for it. So we were able to do that. Now we want to go a little bit further and try to get the code. Like we don't just want this success value, but let us try to print out the console. Let us try to print out the code. Now what you'll notice is this code is the string key, but the corresponding value is a list, and inside this list the first element is what we want to try to access, this value. So how can we access this value? So I'll come back. Instead of doing a data messages, let us type in this key, which is quotes. I replace this message with quotes, and since this is a list, we want to get the 0th element of this list. So I'll type in 0, and then once we get the 0th element, from this 0th element we want to print out the text value. So let us put in text here, but let us make this a string. Now if I save this file and hot restart my application, I'll again get like the button appear here, and let me click on it. So let us see, are we able to get the particular data? Yeah, and this was our original response, which had the quote, I keep guitars that are, and we were able to successfully print out the quote to the terminal, which is really cool. Now let us also try to get the name of this author. So we have an author right here. So I'll come back to it. I'll again copy this print statement that we have, paste it here, but instead of using a text here, I can just type in author. Replace this with author. Hot reload my application really quickly. Hot restart, go to next screen. Once you do that, you should get the quote printed out, and also the name of the person, like who is the author of this particular quote. With that done, we are again able to successfully parse, and we'll also are able to get a particular value of this response. Once we do that, now instead of printing out, let us try to save these in a variable. Let us say a string quote variable, which would have this quote text saved inside it. I'll cut this out, I'll paste it here and end it off with a semicolon. I'll get rid of this print statement, and I'll also have a string author variable, which should save the name of the author of our particular quote. So let me do that, finish this off with the semicolon, get rid of the print line. Now we are able to make this request, get some data, parse it and save it to two variables. We want to now send these variables to our second screen. And how can we do that? Let us save this file and come back to our second screen. So inside our second screen, we have to create two new variables. Up here, let us call this string quote. Let us like quote text. Let us call this quote text. And I'll also create a new variable called author name. I want to show you like how this particular value would be seen. So I have named these variables different. Now inside our constructor, we'll also need to create like we'll also specify like whenever this particular page is screen is called, we need to pass in these values. So I'll have to type in this dot author name and this dot code text here, and I'll have to make these values required because I want to use them on my second screen, and they should be available to me when I'm like creating this second screen. If I'll save this file really quickly, you'll see an error appear on the home screen because we are navigating to this page, but we haven't passed in the values of quote and author. So let us specify the quote text, which you can see is the property name, and what value we want to pass it. We want to specify it as quote. Similarly, we want to do the same for author name, which would be this author that we get. So I'll type in author, and once I save this file, I'll have it running. I can just hot reload my application. Now you'll see like once we go to this second screen, we'll have this quote text and author name here, but we haven't used it. So let us quickly use these values as well. Inside our scaffold, I'll create the body, which I'll set to this column widget. Since we have already talked about layouts in Flutter, you should understand like what we want to do. We want to show the quote text on top and the author name just under it. So I'll create two text widgets, which should take in some data, which would be the quote text, and then one more text widget, which would take in the author name. Once we do that, I can save this file as well. It should do a hot reload. Let us come back to our app, and once I click on this go to next screen, it should take some time, but you will see like the quote appear here and the name of the author. So we are able to do this successfully. We are able to get data off the internet and show it inside our Flutter application. We are navigating from one screen to another. Now the last part left to it is just to make this much beautiful. Like we want to make it prettier, and with that we'll have like a complete application, which is really cool. So I'll come back to my scaffold and give it a app bar, because we want to be able to navigate back if we want to. So I'll save this second screen. You'll see like a app bar appear here. Now let's take this text widgets and try to make them prettier. Inside my this particular text widget, I can give it some style. So there is a property in text widget which we say is style, which takes in a text style, and it lets you improve on certain things. Like you can change the font size. So you can define this font size property, make it 20. So once I do that, you'll see like the text becomes bigger. We also want to do one more thing. Since you can see like the text is a lot, on the side, it's touching the bar. So I can come back to my text widget and wrap it with some padding, which I'll set it to 10. If I'll save this really quickly, you'll see like now it has a padding on its side, which makes it more prominent. Let me also minimize this so you can see changes as they come. With the bottom text too, I want to do something, but let me first wrap it with the widget. Call this align widget. Now align widget lets us what it lets us do is create the alignment. So I can set the alignment property for this widget by typing in alignment and using alignment dot. I'll set it to bottom right. If I'll save this file really quickly, you'll see like the text for this name of the author who has said this code go to the right of this particular screen, which is really cool, which is something we want. Like the code should appear here, the name of the author right here. And I can also modify this text widget. Instead of directly putting in the author name, I can use a dash and then use $ for string interpolation and type in the variable name. With that done, if I'll save this file, you'll see like a small dash appear here before the author name. Let us also make it a bit bigger. So I'll have to specify the style property, which I'll set to text style. And this should take in the font size, which I'll again make a bit bigger. Let us say 15, so that it's not as big as the top text, but it is big enough to be visible. If I save this file really quickly, you'll see like it's a bit bigger. Let us make it a little more. So I'll set it to 18. Alright, so you have this author name appear here, but you see this is a lot touching the, so I'll also have to wrap this with some padding. Wrap with padding, but instead of doing a all, let us only do a only. We only want padding on this right side, so I'll set the right for this particular widget to 10. Now if I save this file, you'll see like it appear a bit to the left, which is due to the padding. Now we are able to get a code, we're able to show it with the author name, which is really cool. If I go back, I'll say go to next screen and it should get me a new code with the author name, but again you can see the padding is still here, the text looks good, the author name is where we want it to be, which is what we wanted to do. So we were able to create a new widget which takes in some variables and it builds somewhat the same UI for all the data that it gets. If I want to go back to my home screen, I'll make a few changes, like instead of making it go to next screen as was in our navigation tutorial, let us say get quote, which should appear better. So if I save this file, come back, it should say get quote, which you can click and it should just show this quote on screen, which is like the major part of the application. We are able to get data off the internet, we are able to navigate to a new page, we're able to pass this data, save it in a variable and pass these variables to the next widget, which is a lot of things that we're doing. And we are able to build the UI too, like we're able to make it prettier. You can also go a bit step further, wrap it in containers and give it a gradient to make it much better. But that is for a more advanced tutorial. So what we wanted to achieve with this is show you how you can get data. We want to be able to update this data on the same screen. Now in Flutter, we have been working with stateless widgets so far, which suggests that there are also widgets that have state, or you can say stateful widgets. Now in Flutter, we can make this particular widget into a stateful widget by clicking on this bulb-like icon and saying convert to state. You would notice that the class home screen ends here and we have something called a home screen state which starts right here. A stateful widget has a state object, as you can see in this particular code. Now what are these stateful widgets and how do you use them? Flutter is a reactive framework, which means that the UI is a function of state. You can understand this state as some data. Let us say there is a variable that has some text inside of it. It stores a string. We can say for example, name of the student, which could be Aditya. Now, when the value of that particular variable changes, the UI should be updated accordingly, which makes sense, right? If the name of the student changes, you want to show up the new name of state. You want to show the new name of the student, and the changes on the UI should be applied accordingly. For that, we have stateful widget, which gives us access to something called a set state function that would basically let us rebuild this widget depending on the new UI changes. The stateful widgets also unlock the different life cycle of a widget. Like, you can tap into the different stages of the life cycle of a stateful widget to perform multitude of actions, like different actions with it. So let us try to see that with example. Let us say our particular scaffold also has an app bar, which would take in like the app bar widget, which we are familiar with so far. So I'll just create that. This app bar would have something called a title property, which normally takes in a text widget. So I can call this particular text widget some variable. So let us create our variable for now really quickly. Let us say inside this home screen, we have a late string which is called title, which would make it really simple to understand. Now, instead of using some empty string here, we can save it to title. Let us also specify some default value so that we don't get an error. Let us say Aditya for now. So we don't really need the late keyword if we have a default value for it. Now, coming down to my on pressed of this button, I'll comment out this code. Now in Flutter, you can simply select the code that you want to comment out and hit Control and the /, which should comment out this code, or you can add these slashes before it. Instead of having something like getting the code inside our on pressed right now, I want to do something called a set state. Now, if I'll type in set state, you'll see it is a callback, which is immediately called. It may not return a future. And what it does is basically notifies the framework that some state of the object has changed and you need to rebuild this widget with the new changes. So I'll just call set state right here. What I want to do is I want to change this particular value, and normally it shouldn't have some futures. So for smaller values, you can apply or just simply call this when you're done with your particular changes. It's normally not recommended to have much processing done inside this set state. So what we can do is we can just set like the title equals to, let us say apple. Now would that work? Let us save this file really quickly. And now it should first of all bring out, like, it should synchronous these files, and you'll see like on the app bar right now there is Aditya, but when I press this get code button, it should update to apple right here, which is really cool, right? You using this set state callback, what we did is we updated the title value to a new particular thing. And similarly, you can reuse this to build your widgets according to the new set of changes. Now we want to do something similar with our particular code. So we can have some code text right here, that is inside our UI, where we have this elevated button as the only widget right here. Let us go ahead and wrap it with a column so that there would be a complete column, and we can get rid of this center button. We can remove this widget because we'll have a complete column right here. So I'll say remove this widget. So right now we have in our body a complete column. One of the column elements should be a button down here, which when clicked should update the quote on screen. The quote initially can be set to some like empty value for now. Let us say quote. Let us make that value empty. Let us also have a variable called author, which can be kept empty for now. Then what we'll do is we'll go to our second screen.dart and we'll cut out some elements that we have. That is, we had these quote and the other widgets that we were already using. So I can cut these out, come back to my home screen and paste it inside the column, which can have like multiple children. So Let us just do that. I'll also get rid of this initial set state button that I created for example, and I'll also get rid of this title. I'll keep my app bar empty because I don't really need it. Let us update this quote and author quote text. Instead of using quote text as on our second screen, we can use the quote variable, and instead of having author name, we can use the author variable, which is cool. At the start, these variables would be empty, so the text would be empty and we wouldn't see much. And we'll also uncomment this code by using the same combination, control and /. And once this is done, we have created like string quote equals to this, author equals to this, and instead of making them as new variables, we can get rid of this declaration again, and that would mean that we are using these already created variables and setting their values to this new value. And lastly, we can just call a set state callback to notify of changes. We'll keep it empty because we have already added the new values for quote and data. And after we save this, you'll see like at the start there isn't much on screen, like the screen both this text, quote and author are empty. We are seeing the smaller space up here because of the padding that we have applied. And once we click on get quote, it should take some time, and then we'll also have to get rid, like you can see it also came on this screen, but if we remove this second screen navigation and we only have set state right here, if we save this file and hot reload it again, you'll see like right now we are getting some default value. Let us just hot restart the application. So hot restart complete. The default value is nothing inside our text and quote widgets. They are empty. The smaller space is due to the padding applied to them. And now when we click on get quote, it should take some time, but the code should appear here. So it makes content makes pure men rich. Discontent makes rich men poor by Benjamin Franklin, which has appeared here because the widget set state, like it updated the new data on screen, and after we got this data we were able to show it on the same screen, which is really cool, right? So far in this tutorial we have learned the different navigations. We have also seen like the different widgets in Flutter, but we also got to learn about this new stateful widget, which lets us do some processing and also like get data on screen when we click and update the UI with it. So once that is done, I think we have covered a lot of stuff. We are able to build our own applications, and your bigger applications are just combination of these smaller widgets that you would use over time. We can now successfully get rid of this second home screen, like we do not really need it, and moving it to recycle bin. So with that gone, we'll have like the home screen, which lets us do this. And there are also different things, different life cycle of the stateful widget that you can tap into. There is init state, which is basically called when the widget is initialized. There is also a dispose method, which is called when you get rid of this or when you dispose this method off. So you can set certain actions to perform when your widget is being initialized or when it is being disposed. And you can also improve on this outer widget by adding them some content, some decoration, like wrapping it in a container and adding some decoration to it. And you can always refer up tutorials by going over to internet. And thank you so much for following along this course. We were able to cover a lot of things in it. We started with the basics of what is Flutter, how do you get started with it. We went on to learn the simple Dart concepts. We looked into a number of Flutter widgets, the scaffold text, the layout widgets. We looked into navigation in Flutter. How can you use external packages, build your application, get data off the internet, parse it, and show it inside the UI of your application. We looked into the stateless and the stateful widgets, and overall did a lot of stuff. And with this, we have come to the end of this course. Again, really grateful to you for following along. I am Aditya Thakur. I've been a developer with Flutter, and if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. Going forward, I would recommend taking up concepts of Flutter by building up projects, getting your hands dirty, and trying to debug whatever problems you run into by looking up over the internet or maybe asking someone from the community for help. Again, really excited for your journey as a Flutter developer and wish you a great time with Flutter. Thank you so much.